information from our panelists and to be able to ask questions. And I would ask that if you have questions, that you are encouraged to do so. If you have comments, that you might want to turn them into a question so that we can move the program along and get the most information to all of us who are here. Bea did tell us that she had one important piece of information that she wasn't able to give us at the very end of her presentation, so she gets a minute and a half or thereabouts to fill us in on that, and then our other committee person, Daphne Shaw, will introduce our panel for the final session. Thank you.
I really don't need a minute and a half. I forgot to tell you that there is an online voter guide that the League puts out called Vote 411. You go to vote411.org, put in your address, it'll pull up your ballot, who's going to be on your ballot according to your address, and then you will see candidates and their statements, and also it has Prop 1 on there as well. If your candidate is not in that Vote 411 list, that's because they have not responded to the invitation. If they've not responded, their deadline was supposedly tomorrow, Monday. If you have a way of contacting them, call them, write them, email, and say, how come you haven't put your campaign information in Vote 411? And tell them how important that is. Thank you.
Hi. So this panel is specifically on Proposition 1, and, I'm sorry. This panel is specifically regarding Proposition 1, and we have our three panelists here. I'll introduce the three of them now at the beginning. You've already had an introduction to our Senator Susan Edmund, and so I won't elaborate on anything in terms of what she's done in the past. I'll just say that one of her chief legislative priorities over her many years in Sacramento has focused on health. She currently serves as the chair of the Senate Health Committee and is a member of many other Senate committees. In the 22-23 legislative session, she authored a bill that created care courts, and in the 23-24 session that just ended, she authored SB 43. That particular bill expanded the definition of gravely disabled, which formerly had been, the definition had been unable to provide food, shelter, or clothing by virtue of their mental illness, and that has been expanded to include personal safety and medical issues. And it also allows an individual who is suffering only from substance use disorder to be involuntarily held, or as some of you know, the term 5150. So that's what I have for Susan. Our next speaker will be Genevieve Valentine. She's a licensed marriage family therapist. She began her career in San Joaquin County as a clinician and then moved to Merced County to be the mental health director there. She's returned to San Joaquin County and is now the director of San Joaquin County Behavioral Health Services. Few people here know her. And our final speaker will be Latanya Richard. I'm sorry, I mispronounced your name again. Richard. She's a subject matter expert, a certified Medi-Cal peer support specialist, a certified domestic violence and sexual assault advocate, and a social justice warrior. She has worked as a peer support specialist for 3 years and is a co-founder and associate director of Communities Voices, which is a nonprofit. So, panel, please, we'll start with
I'm starting?
No, Senator.
Oh, starting? You're starting? You're starting.
I get the feeling there's a lot of folks in the room who work for behavioral health. And I'm glad to see you here, and so I'm gonna talk a little bit to you. So I want to start off by saying, and I don't mean to be flippant, but change is hard. So I'm also an LCSW and have worked in and around substance abuse and mental health since I was 18. My first job was when I was 18 years old at Crestwood Manor, a law facility, and I've worked in every modality of care since then. During my time in the legislature, I focused a lot on mental health issues, and as we've seen the continued decline, I think, nationally of our mental health, and most specifically in California, just because our cost of housing is so high, and the pandemic didn't do any of us any favors, that we have found ourselves in a state of crisis. I was a professor at Sac State and was involved in implementing when this proposition passed the first time, and we were redoing how we did mental health then, and everybody was freaked out. No, we can't change from the way we're doing it now. This will never work, right? And now we got a different group of people saying we can't change it now because this is the way now it works. So as we continue to see the evolution, I think, of what we understand about brain health, about what we understand about recovery, we also need to redo how we pay for things and we prioritize things, right? We have heard now for the last couple of years with the crisis that we face on our streets and the crisis that we face just driving down the street and having people in the middle of the road. We know that people have never had more suicides. We know that we've never had more overdoses. We know we've never had more people hit by cars because they were in the middle of the street unsafe. People dying of being too cold, people dying of being too hot, people dying of untreated medical conditions. They can go from having an infected toenail to being dead because they've gone septic because they didn't know that they needed care. Okay, so first of all, I just want to pretend like we don't have a perfect mental health system, and so I hope nobody here is arguing that we maintain the status quo, because I would respond to you that the status quo is not acceptable for you, for the people that you treat, and for the general public who is saying y'all have to do something. Okay, so for the last couple years, I have been very involved in trying to do just that. Right, so during the pandemic time, I was the chair of the budget on Health and Human Services. And we did the B-CHIP program, right? We've got over $7 billion going out the door to do more bridge funding, right? To do those outreach, to get out there and meet people where they are, Operation Room Key, Home Key, and then the continued build out of more infrastructure, right? Nobody in this room is going to tell me we have enough beds to be able to take care of everybody that we want to take care of in a safe place where they don't feel like they're going to be assaulted. That does not exist. And it is our responsibility to make sure that exists. And it's our responsibility as a county to do that as well. We can't just point to the state to say do something if we're not willing to look at ourselves and make those same kind of changes. All right? So when we passed Prop 63 back in 2004, I will offer to you that about 25% of our population was uninsured. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
Objectively, that is true. If you look now, and I would say, having a bunch of women in the legislature, we've expanded healthcare to as many people as we could find to expand it to, but we need to have the providers to be able to do the care part of it. I just lost my train of thought. I was on a good roll. Man, that roll was good. What was I saying? Now, we look at the percentage of people who are uninsured, and it's between 5 and 8%. Right? That's good. Right? That is good news. So when we first started funding through the MHSA, right, 75% of the funding was going for the counties to do whatever they wanted to do with that, right? About another 10%, 19% was supposed to be going for prevention, and then a small point of that was going for innovation, right? And so that's what has been being funded: prevention, intervention. I would say there's not been a whole lot of programs that have been developed at a county level that have been then scaled up to be able to use that excellent innovation across the state, right? We know that there are some good evidence-based, like early psychosis, right? But that is something that every county can do. So that's back to my split up with the state. So every county has been doing it different, right? And we have not, when we look at the outcomes right now with that money, and again, when we passed that, it was how many million went out a year, David? Do you remember? About 100 million, 200 million? That 1% tax on millionaires. Well, friends, we've grown a lot of millionaires in the state of California, because now that fund is about $3 billion a year that we distribute to counties. So that's a whole lot more money than was there in 2004. And if we think about that pot just going to counties to say, take care of everybody. Now, and at that time, in that pot was probably a very large percentage of people who did not have healthcare insurance, that you could not bill for, that you could not pull down more resources. What we're saying is now, that pot, especially your seniors you're talking about, they all have Medicare, maybe Medi-Cal. So, and now we're also applying for the Behavioral Health Connect program to get another waiver. And through CalAIM, we can bill for navigators. We can bill for housing. We can bill for those supports that you couldn't bill for before. So the idea is you should be able to just use that big pot of money to pay for everything when there's so much now that you can bill for through private insurance and through public insurance, right? So what we're saying, counties, is don't take that 90% of money you got and do whatever you'd like with it. We understand that everyone thinks they're doing great things, but I'll tell you, there's no outcome, there's no data, and not just pick on our county. You go on any county's website, and they will have, here's our 3-year plan. And some I looked at were from 2009. And you look at the state analysis of their plans, and they were like deficit, deficit, deficit. But because there was no mechanism for accountability across the state of California, every county's been doing it their own way with different kinds of outcomes that nobody knows about. As we continue to pump billions of dollars down more into the system, right? This last couple of years, we pumped $12 billion down into the system without a lot of good things to show for it. And driving up here today, as I live in the neighborhood, this is my city council district, I live in this neighborhood, I passed massive encampments right there by the freeway again, I worked there a couple weeks ago, and people camped in the park right here. How does anybody feel good about that? None of us feel good about that. That's terrible. And how does anybody get better like that? They don't. So, redirecting the money to say 35% of it should go for those who need it the very most, and that is full service partnerships, right? That is an evidence-based program, full service partnerships, which means everything that it takes, if it's social support, if it's housing, whatever it needs to get somebody stable, the medication, whatever they need, right? So that is going to be 35% of it. And I would imagine a lot of your seniors are eligible for full service partnership, right? Those, and you heard me say we passed Care Court last year. Our county didn't decide to implement it when they could. They decided to put it off for a year. But Care Court is also coming, and that is going to take those very sickest of the sick and involve them with a civil judge to bring the county to the table, and the judge to the table, and a navigator to the table, and say, what is the plan that is going to keep this person stable? And if the county can't meet that plan, the county will be charged $1,000 a day. Right? So all of you who have felt frustrated that you didn't have enough resources, that the county wasn't doing their part, this is not a tool to force people into treatment. This is a tool to say, counties, you got to do better. We have to make sure we are serving the sickest of the sick, right? Because we are saying that there's a lot more funding to be able to bill for and pay for some of those services before that we were just doing through the Mental Health Services Act. Right now, and talking about kids for a minute, right? There's been a lot of focus, and so we put more into kids. And so I just don't want people to think this is the only thing that's happening, and you all know that, right? We have been doing a lot to change a lot of things, but this is the key then that will fund it. So let me go back to explaining the budget. So 35% for that, and then another 35% for housing, right? And that's not for the construction of, but that's for your seniors to be able to pay their rent. That's to be able to keep somebody in their area. That's to be able to, somebody who potentially couldn't live with their parents before because they were too out of control. Now you can redo that back room for them. Those kinds of, we're not talking about it's all going to be new construction, but that part in the Mental Health Services Act, the policy part, we'll be able to use for ongoing supports for housing. And then the other part of it will be, the 35% will be that pool that you've used now just for everything. So you're going to have to focus, right? And so if and when this passes, it won't be until 26 that the changes will actually occur, and that will come after. That will come after a really vigorous process to look at everything the county does. What are we doing? What is working? What do we think we want to keep? And then we keep that, right? You get to make your own plan about what you're going to do, right? So you're worried about losing something. If we show it's working, we'll keep doing it and find a way to do it. The part of that the state's going to get more is because the state's going to take on, which they should, some of that innovation, right? Siskiyou County is not gonna be able to do, right? They're not gonna be able to have the resources to come up with innovations, right? So you can have some off-the-shelf stuff that we know is evidence-based, something's working in the county, then the state can take that, scale it up, so that any county, anywhere can say, oh, this is something that we can use in our county. So it's to provide like a greater resource for the state to be more involved in helping and directing. The plans then have to do, like every year, then we're looking at how we're spending that money. And we're not just looking at the MHSA money, right? Because that's right now, if you look at the MHSA reports, they're only looking at that money. So you're not looking at realignment money, you're not looking at the opioid settlement money, you're not looking at any things that you're billing for, you're only looking at that MHSA. So this also is gonna open up those buckets so we see where the money is coming from all the slots, how it goes in the buckets, and what our outcomes are, what is working, what is not, getting rid of what's not, doing more of what is, and helping every county come along to be able to make their plans. So, in a nutshell, that's what we're talking about. So if we, and this issue around secure housing, I don't know if this is gonna come up or not. We need some level of secure housing, right? I mean, you can't have people just in the ERs forever and ever and ever with no place to go, and then somebody else can't get a place, or somebody else is in crisis. You have to expand that. But that's gonna have to be a plan with the county, taking a plan to the state, based on our needs, this is what we think we need. And so, well, how do you stop people from just building log facilities? Well, why would you just wanna build a log facilities when you know that's the highest, that's the most money that you're gonna have to spend for the least amount of people? That doesn't make common sense. So I don't see a world in which that happens. And you'd have to get county buy-in, and you'd have to get state buy-in that this is the best way to be able to use our resources, right? And in order to be able to use more lock settings, you have to be able to show you have a full continuum of care to move people up and down the system as it's required, right? I mean, how many of you have a client, they're doing really well, all of a sudden they have a crisis, they need to go inpatient for a minute, or they need to another outpatient group. You have to have that full continuum of care. And so that's what this is setting out to build. But at the same time, we're having the biggest survey and the biggest input on seniors right now that we've ever had. The Department of Aging is doing phenomenal work right now, looking for more right now. There's gonna, for the first time ever, they're even doing an LGBTQ, like what do our LGBTQ seniors need, because that is oftentimes different, and people are forced back in the closet at the end of life, right? So they're looking comprehensively. At schools, right, we're looking out a way now to be able to, for school, and I'm sure the counties are already working on this, to work with the plans, to have the plans really built and be able to have more services at schools for kids, right? I just talked with the new director of the youth and behavioral adolescent, what's that thing called? Anyway, so the big new kid thing, and if you look at your phone right now, you go to calhope.org, calhope.org. There are 2 apps on there. One for kids 0 to 6, or 0 to 10, and the other one for teens. That will give them a wellness coach, an online, on time, somebody to be able to interact with, right? Does it take the place of a therapist? No. But how many times have we heard that kids are waiting forever and they can't get an appointment? And we did a massive survey of kids, like, what do you want? They didn't want all the time just someone that they had to tell everything to. So I had my daughter download it yesterday to start navigating around. She's 15. Right, in school, has been through the whole COVID thing, and she already found it. She's like, Mama, let me talk about myself and fill out little questionnaires about myself. And I'm like, oh, that's lovely. I mean, kids love that kind of stuff, right? But if that gets them off the TikTok and on the app, and then it can also, if they want to give more information, can actually connect them to someone in their area, right? So I don't want you to think this is the only thing we're working on, but this is kind of the final piece. Like, how then are we going to pay for the funding? How are we going to pay for the housing? How do we really focus on the sickest of the sick? That becomes such a visual sight for everybody that they just feel so, I think, it is so easy for us, people talked before about people screaming at politicians. When we have to unsee people when we walk over them, then it is so easy to unsee our neighbors, to unsee our politicians, and just think everybody is, has no emotions or no value, right? I want to get us all to get back to a place where we value each other, and partly we do that by caring for the sickest of us. And right now, and it's not like we're making these people up. People are like, oh, you're going to ask us to spend more money. These are people in the community. I'm not making them up. They're here already, right? They should already be being treated, but they're really hard to treat. And so we have tried to provide more tools through Care Court, through the redefinition of grave disability and through a lot more resources on housing and then on workforce, right? We know there's not enough workforce. And so part of this also, in that one pot, is to pay for the ongoing development of workforce. And again, not just licensed people, we need those folks, but wellness coaches, a whole new, area. And again, as running the budget, we really made sure that those people were gonna be able to be paid a living wage, that people who start on the bottom of a mental health career have a way to move up and down and get supported and education around their process, not just new scholarships for people who already want to get a degree, but how do we provide support for those in an ongoing fashion? So I am glad to answer more questions. That's just kind of an overview. It is not the intent to take away everything that you think that you're doing that works wonderfully. We hope you keep on doing everything that works wonderfully, but there's going to have to be a process where we can actually prove it, where we can see how it fits in the larger piece, where we come up with a plan, and then go forward. So I mean, after 26, I think we really begin to see things turn around when things go into effect. We have to get it passed first, and I understand change is hard, and I understand when you're doing something every day that you feel like it is wonderful, brings value, it is very scary to think about all of that changing. We don't want our community partners to go away. We want more help, not less help. We just want to be able to use our money more wisely and with more focus from the state to be able to say, that's not acceptable, county. You have to do it, you have to move this way. Or no, we don't think that's a good use of funding. But that comes also from community support. It comes from putting more people on the local boards, more people on the state level boards, and it's getting as many eyes on this as we possibly can. So I'll be around it. You want me to take questions now, Colleen, or at the end? Okay, all right, thank you.
As our next panelist is Genevieve Valentine, as I indicated earlier, she is the Director of Behavioral Health Services here in San Joaquin County. So she'll present
I actually have a formal presentation. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a teacher at heart, so I like slides and visuals. If there was a whiteboard, I'd draw it all out too. But first and foremost, I want to say thank you for being here. My staff that are here, our CBOs that are here, some of our other colleagues that are here, community supports, thank you for being here. I actually have my notes ready to go as like a stakeholder meeting, so I have all of your guys' feedback. But I also want to say that I am not going to have any discussion on pros or cons. I am not going to have a position either way. I don't think that is my place or my responsibility to do that as your behavioral health director. Our county did not come out with a position or pro or con, opposition or support. So I'm just going to give you the down and dirty facts of what does this look like as of today. I will go into some of the pots of money and give you an overview of the changes of MHSA to BHSA, just for context, in order to really see where those little pots of money are, as well as how much we actually receive approximately every year in MHSA, which is about 1/3 of our budget at whole, so that's important to know, and how it's currently being used. So there was a really good job already. Next slide. Sorry, I'm so used to it. No, it's okay. So B did a really good job already, including the 2 different components of Prop 1. Just want to highlight them again in case you missed that. There's 2 parts of Proposition 1. It is the restructuring of MHSA, as well as a bond measure. So it is an Assembly bill and a Senate bill here in California. It will be on the March 5th ballot, so you guys have 1 month to educate yourselves on what it is that you want the state to do, because this is a state proposition, not a county proposition. So this is a state proposition that then the counties that have to implement. To go into the next slide, I do want to highlight once again the bond measure, which is the AB 531. It does create the 30-year bond. This is not something that behavioral health counties have to pay for, so we'll make sure that that bond measure is not something that our department is responsible for paying for, so I want to make sure that that is clear. It does authorize $6.38 billion of bond obligations in order to finance permanent supportive housing, locked and unlocked behavioral health treatment, and residential settings. Like B said, it is broken up into different categories within those funds. B-CHIP is a program that has been initiated for the last couple of years, different rounds. Behavioral health has won B-CHIP round 5. So we are anticipating the bond measure, if it does pass with Prop 1, will be set up similarly of that. It is a competitive grant, so it's not just counties applying for the bond. Private CBOs and other entities can apply for those grant dollars in order to bring in what you guys want into the community. So it's not just solely a county opportunity to bring in different programming. The next part of Prop 1 is SB 326, authored by Senator Eggman. So I will be the first to say I am not the expert on the measure. She is the author, she would be. However, I have read the 300-page SB 326 at least 7 times. I do have my notes in the columns. I've had the opportunity to ask questions. What would this entail? So I may not be an expert, but I'm well versed. So this is a very high level of the 350 plus pages, so I apologize that I'm trying to get it into 7 slides. So please read it, it's well authored. So in terms of the summary for you, it does establish a new subset of funding within MHSA. It's a 30% subset that is specifically for housing and housing first specific reservations on how to provide housing services. It does allow for SUD to be part of the millionaire tax. For those of you who do not know, MHSA at this moment in time cannot spend any of its funds on SUD as a primary. It can be mental health and dual diagnosis, but not substance abuse at all. We cannot include that in our plan. It does create a new structure of planning, data gathering, reporting, accountability across the different counties. It does also require our 3-year plan to include plans for our realignment dollars, our block grants, our opiate settlement grants, and other funding streams or independent grants that we may hustle to get. It does overhaul the adult, older adult, and children's system of care. So it does have language in SB 326 that does change some of the criteria for those who meet our targeted population. It really hones in on that, the sickest of the sick. There was some gray area. It hones very much into the sickest of the sick. It does reallocate to 10% of administration to the state rather than the 5% in MHSA. It eliminates behavioral health, county behavioral health, as the funding priority of prevention. So it does move prevention funding over to the state. I'll show you more of what that looks like. It does establish new Medi-Cal benefits, specifically benefits for supported employment, as well as ACT and FACT, which are evidence-based practices for those within full service partnerships. And it also allows for an expansion of the new waiver of BH Connect through CMS. It also encourages counties to move current early intervention programs and align them into Medi-Cal billable programming. For those of you who do not know, in this county, almost 0 of our early intervention funds and programs bill Medi-Cal as of today. So I can go into more of that as well. It also requires us as a behavioral health plan to get contracts with private insurance entities as well as the health plans. So it forces us to be more aligned, for us to have HEDIS measures that are the same, as well as provide actual specialty mental health, sickest of the sick services across California, not simply just based off of Medi-Cal. And for those of you who don't know, we are a Medi-Cal provider, so this expands who we will be serving. So it's important to the next slide, and I'll go into more of the buckets, but I do want to let you guys see the timeline. It is quick and fast. You guys have a month to know everything that is happening. I'm glad you are here. So it is on the March 5th ballot between January 1, 25 to 6/30/26. We have 18 months to really evaluate what we have going on in our county based off of our current plan. It gives us 18 months to establish SMART goals. It allows us to look at our infrastructure within our department to really assess what's working, what's not working, both internally but within our contract providing programs, in order to make some tough decisions, which you will have to see in a bit. As of today, we did an estimate already in terms of our budget of how much from an administrative perspective this will cost behavioral health to make this transition happen. And when I mean what those costs are, we are looking at new platforms to have for data measures. What would it mean to have contractors provide us objective decisions on which programs are working and not working? That includes county programs in addition to our CBOs. As your behavioral health director, I don't want to be swayed one way or another of what's working or not, just based off of those are my staff or those are the staff of a contractor. We want to make sure that our SMART goals and the programming that is happening is truly what is working and not working. So as of today, the administrative cost to lift up that transitional period will cost us $1.7 million, with approximately $900,000 of that will be ongoing in terms of us making sure that we have the infrastructure necessary and the infrastructure maintenance necessary to have all of those data measures moving forward. The budget team that we have, for those of you who do not know, I do not have an individual deputy for finance. There is a deputy over healthcare services that part of his time is with behavioral health. He oversees budget overall. So we need to look up our budgeting team. In addition to that, in that 18 months, we will then have to put together a new 3-year plan that includes all the different processes, have an expanded stakeholder meeting to roll out January 1 of 26 with all provisions in effect of SB 326. There are some provisions that are in effect today, such as us looking at different quality measures with the health plans, the different HIDUS measures, and so some of it has already been rolled out that we are actively participating in and working towards. So to put a visual of what's under admin sent to you about your categories, I have a slide for you to actually see that and to reiterate what she shared with you. So there is a new bucket of the MHSA, which would be 30% specifically for housing funds. Of that, it's supposed to be 50% of the 30 is for chronically homeless with a focus on encampments. The other 50% will be chronically homeless, mentally ill, or substance abuse sufferers. They do not have to have Medi-Cal in order to qualify for this bucket of funds. With the approval of DHCS and after all of the B-CHIP funds, 25% can go to capital development once we get through the bond measure, the B-CHIP fund grants, and then in order to use 25% of that 30 to actually build and so forth. Although we are not a rural or small county, I did want to say that there is an exemption for them to ask for DHCS to make some changes to that 30% based off of their targeted population and their census. It does also require that CSAC and CBHDA, which is the Association for Behavioral Health Directors, to work together with the Department of Healthcare Services and the state on what all of our matrices will be in order to make sure that we are providing the right housing for the right person at the right time. It also is for housing interventions, and I want to make sure you guys hear that part. Housing interventions is the 30%. It is not treatment interventions. So it is two separate types of interventions, and it is defined as the two different intervention styles. FSP housing interventions can be part of this funding, and it prohibits us from using housing funds for treatment services, which is why I want to make sure that you guys heard that part. Housing intervention is different than treatment intervention. The next slide will actually define what a housing intervention is. The eligible housing interventions are rental subsidies, operating subsidies, shared housing, family housing options, non-federal share of rental for transitional housing, capital development projects, if is approved by DHCS, and project-based housing. The next bucket, so that's the first bucket, the next bucket would be 35% specifically for FSPs. There already is a requirement for us to have FSPs, which I'll show you in a minute, but 35% will be targeted for full service partnerships with a very specific look at evidence-based practices within our full service partnerships and full wraparound supports. And it requires us to really look at the step-down procedures and criteria of those that are in full service partnerships. The next slide is the CBSS. We typically call this our system development dollars. These are to expand core-driven services This is typically outpatient services, crisis services. This will realign into all of the other buckets, so 35% would fund the extended services for children, adult, older adult, early intervention, outreach and engagement, WET, which is Workforce Development Fund, CFTN, which is our capital facility and technology dollars, as well as the innovative projects. So if our county does want to include an innovative project, we can within that bucket. We're just not required to at this moment if this passes. Within the 35%, there has to be 51% used for those for early intervention. Of the early intervention, 51% must be for those under the age of 25. So we have to get really smart of which percentage is what percentage to what percentage. We got a smart behavioral health team, we'll figure it out. We also have to consider other funding streams. So there is no dedicated funding for prevention services. So I want to make sure I say that part again. It realigns that over to the state. And we can fund other projects such as innovation, but it has to be through this bucket. So our next slide is just a visual of what it is today and what it will be. So on your left is the current bucket. So of the 100%, 5%, now mind you, when I say 100%, I mean 100% that we get. I don't mean what's taken off the top. So the 100% that our county receives, 5% is for innovation, 10% is PEI, prevention and early intervention for those under 25. Prevention and early intervention, the other 9% does not have to be targeted for 25, but we can use it for those under 25. 39% approximately is full service partnerships, and then 37% is those core services. If Prop 1 passes, the language does change, and so there's 5 categories now instead of the different buckets. So it'd be the housing of the chronically homeless at 15%, and other housing is 15, so that would make the 30. 35% for FSP, and then of the other 35, I broke it down for you guys so you can see it. 17.5% will be for core services, 8.7 will be for early intervention, and 9.15 will be for early intervention under the age of 25. So there's also some other important things that you may not care about, I care about. That's the next few slides that gets changed with Prop 1 for our department. It does change the state allocation from 5% for admin cost to 10%. It ends up breaking down into 3% is specifically for the workforce, behavioral health workforce that the state will monitor and implement. 4% will be project-based population prevention, and then there will be 3% for the administration. So the 4% for prevention will actually be redirected to the California Department of Public Health. There will be a new innovation fund that we can actually potentially apply for in order to receive additional funds if necessary, if we can't get it in our buckets. It does require our planning to include SUD services, which it did not before, with the hope that half of our services for MHSA will be substance abuse and mental health, or a hybrid of those that have co-occurring. And then our prudent reserve, so our rainy day fund, will decrease from potentially 33% to 20%, which would be, the rest of those funds would be used for other pots of money. All right, our next slot is, as well as all of the volatility. For those of you who don't know, MHSA is the most volatile funding stream that we get. So at 1 minute we might get a certain allotment, and the next year we might get a different allotment depending on millionaire taxes and what they're paying and so forth. It is our most volatile money. So this does give us some baseline dollars. So it's not as volatile. I don't mean baseline in terms of allocation. What I mean is we have a moving budget for 5 years that we can pull through in order to make sure that we are comfortable with what those dollars look like. That way we don't have to either expand or cut year to year to year based off of the current structure. It also requires us to get approval of our plan. Now we submit our plan, and sometimes we get feedback from the state, sometimes we don't get feedback from the state. So this actually does require the Department of Healthcare Services to approve the plan that we will be submitting. It also puts into Prop 1 that CSAC, CBHDA will work with DHCS on what that approval process is going to look like and how to maintain local involvement and voice in that piece. And like I said, they're looking at how to really look at revenue sustainability and so forth. Next part, the planning and reporting does expand. It is all of our funds, not just our MHSA. It also requires us to do additional collaborations with public health in terms of population needs assessments and how do we work alongside our public health partners. It also has us look at very specific quality measures that are the same quality measures as the health plans. So when we talk about this, the county funds, please know that we now have 3 Medi-Cal health plans that our department has to work directly with. And there was a question earlier about children's services. So the California Youth Behavioral Health Initiative that went into effect 2 years ago realigned what our responsibility was for children in schools and what the health plan's responsibility was. So we are currently this year working with our contract providers to help them become contracted with the health plans in order to provide services at the schools. That way it's not dollars that we are currently funding through behavioral health, but they can get revenue and Medi-Cal through the health plans. The next slide. So DHCS's role also increases. DHCS is the Department of Healthcare Services. They are our auditors. They are the ones to make sure that everything is copacetic of what we are doing. They are going to determine which evidence-based practices that the counties and the state can use. So we cannot just pick whatever best practice. There's going to be a list of statewide approved evidence-based practices or soon to be best practice evidence-based, because they do allow us to have things that are still being studied as evidence-based practices on that list. It does provide a statewide matrix of making sure the services that we provide are just equally as good as Stanislaus or Merced or wherever else we may be, so we'll have the same standards. It does allow us to transfer a little bit of money in between those buckets. It's up to
7 and 7 up to 14.
Thank you. I think that's like 3 more slides. So it does give us the ability to have stakeholder input of where those funds go. And so there will be caps and monetary sanctions if we do not do what we are saying that we are going to do.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but if you could give us your slides, we'd be glad to put it on our website so that people who are here and anyone else who isn't here could access it, but I want to make sure we have enough time for our third speaker because we are.
Can I do like 3 more slides, that way you can see the visual?
Excuse me, I want you to do the one with the categories.
Yes.
Do that one, please.
Okay.
Thank
So can you
Yeah, the top
go
one.
just a couple more slides, couple more slides, couple more slides. So this is that new categories that include the state, the graph on the far right does equal more than 100. And the reason why it equals more than 100 is I wanted you to see where the other categories are. That 10% up there is going to be taken off the top. And then this is our 100% now. Prior to the 5% to the state was part of our 100. So our next slide there is also the visual. So the far slide is what the new buckets are, but if we had to go 50% SUD specific, 50% mental health, that's what the pieces would look like. So that's why it went to the 1.7 of us trying to figure out how to make this all happen of those categories. The next slide is the fiscal impacts. So the far side is what will happen based off of a large county. We are in the large county there. Monterey being the medium and the small, but the next slide actually makes this bigger so you can see our county specifically. So currently in our MHSA plan, so this is based off of our 23-24 numbers, we currently have oh my God, I should have brought my glasses, I can't see that. So currently we spend $46 million on our outpatient core services and crisis services. Based off of the new buckets, that would actually drop down to $15 million. The full service partnerships, we actually have above the 35. So if there wasn't that 7% leeway, our 44.6% of FSPs would actually have to be cut to 41.12. Our prevention and early intervention is currently 19 million. It'll increase to 21, but I think it's important that you know a lot of our prevention programs would not meet criteria to be an early intervention, and some do, so we'd have to make them billable early intervention programs. As of today, and yesterday at 5 o'clock I ran this, we would actually have to decrease 30.1 million in core services, 3.5 in FSP, and move that over to the housing bucket. 61% of our MHSA is contracted out, and as of today, 20% of those contracts would have to be eliminated for us to potentially have contracts for housing supports in order to reallocate that. I think it's also important, just for transparency, it says that we only spend 1.13 million on housing. That's MHSA. I do want to point out we also spend 10.1 million annually on housing from other housing streams. So our department spends well over $11 million currently on housing. This will just expand our housing options and the ability to have other housing pieces. So there you go.
Unfortunately, our time is getting very tight, which I was afraid was going to happen. But we do want to we're supposed to be out of here at 12:30, but I'm going to make the executive decision that we're going to be a little bit longer. So, LaTanya, if you're please, she's representing the Californians against Proposition 1.
Hello, my name is LaTanya Richard. I am thanking the League of Women Voters and San Joaquin Behavioral Health. I don't have much time. People in charge ran it out. Today, I would like to speak on a subject that's very important to me and my community, which is Proposition 1. I know that Proposition 1, by cutting community service and expanding institutionalization, will cause others to have the same horrifying experiences that I did, and that's why I'm here. So I'm gonna bring you the human side of this bill and what it really means. Proposition 1 was done in a hurry and in a secretive fashion, eliminating the pure voice that we came together and spoke to them about when it was MHSA, the SB 326. They eliminated us and did the bill in a rush in secret. So while this is disguised as a great solution to the housing, mental health, and substance use crisis, when it is in fact neither a solution nor is it humane. The Mental Health Services Act was created by people with mental illness themselves to provide permanent, dedicated funding for programs for prevention, early intervention, youth innovation solutions, and programs for underserved communities, including racially and ethnically diverse groups and the LGBTQIA+ community. Proposition 1 will cut these programs, leaving the people that are currently getting these services and that are stable without a lifeline, which increases mental health challenges and increases homelessness and makes marginalized communities hit hardest. There is no question we have a severe housing problem in California, but the state's homelessness problem is not going to be fixed by involuntary committing or conserving people. That is not a cure for homelessness. As a former spouse of an Army veteran, the sister of a Marine veteran and Army veteran, and the daughter, granddaughter, niece, and cousin of military service members that fought in World War I, World War II, the Vietnam War, as well as the Korean War, I know firsthand how someone can go to war and come back totally different than when they left. Coming back to this country after fighting so hard, being hailed a hero by your neighbors, only to be dragged through red tape or ignored by the government that you fought to protect so that you could receive your benefits, isn't just a slap in the face. It's enough to doubt your existence. Hospital beds are not homes. In 2018, when Governor Newsom became governor, there was a state legislation bill, there was a bill that had $4 billion, Proposition 1 before had authorized $4 billion in bonds for veterans for housing assistance and affordable housing. Proposition 2 authorized the diversion of $140 million per year from the MHSA Act to programs to pay for $2 billion in supportive housing for people with mental illness. Where'd that money go? Where's that money? In 2018, there were 11,311 homeless veterans. Today, there are still 10,000. Where's the money? Again, with the economy as it is, anyone can become unhoused unless you are wealthy. Most Californians who do have homes are spending so much on housing that an employment lapse or a family medical emergency can put you at risk for losing your home. Everyone is replaceable. Everyone. There isn't enough available housing in the state for people who are deemed middle class, let alone those that are low income. The corporate landlords are allowed to come in and buy up these houses and jack up rents in this state, a perfect reflection of the priorities of Gavin Newsom and his administration. Their wealthy donors always take priority over the needs of the people, and after all, that is the American way for the governor and his cronies in the legislature. As before, we've already stated who some of those donors are, and yes, this is a David and Goliath fight. They have raised millions, we've raised $1,000. But they've also raised millions because they have the pharmacy professionals on their side, California correctional officers on their side, Blue Cross Blue Shield of California, Elevance Health, the Nurses Association, law enforcement, firefighters, the Coalition of Probation, energy companies, water companies, and many building associations. These people stand to make millions off of the backs of people in this state. Now, two of my favorite Latin phrases, one is post hoc ergo propter hoc, which essentially says that because X happened, Y must have caused it. That is a fundamental logical fallacy. The people forcing this bill are currently in this mind state. They believe that homelessness and substance use are driven only by mental illness, when in fact, the situation is cum hoc ergo propter hoc, which means therefore because of this. Let me expand. These are the steps that California and the United States has taken to get us to this point. 1, people who create and build nothing get paid millions to sit on their butts and come up with ideas, raise prices, lobby our government so that they can continue to pay unlivable wages and not offer health care or other benefits to the people that keep this world running. Two, if they lose that lobbying battle, they either move the company to a new state, ship the jobs overseas, switch to automation, or eliminate the jobs altogether. 3, lobbyists force the narrative that if wages rise, prices will increase. If this is true, according to the US Census, in the last 40 years, household income in California has gone from $25,290 to $85,000, showing that a rise of 237.5%. The lobbyists run with these numbers and show those as factual so that they can say that this is why prices are high. But when you adjust for inflation, from the household income in California in 1984 to current was $64,060 and $71,000 respectively. That means income literally only rose 42.2%. Now let's look at the last 10 years. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the consumer price index for all items in the United States in 10 years rose 25.2% from December 2013 to December 2023. The consumer price index for housing nationwide rose 32.8%. But the housing price index in California in that same 10 years rose 97.4%. Make it make sense. Make it make sense. 4, this creates situations where people who could once thrive with one job can barely survive working 2 or 3 jobs. People are paying higher childcare and food costs, plus they are more than the recommended 30% of their household income for housing. This housing is also usually inadequate for the family's needs. 5, low-income neighborhoods are usually in food deserts with a high concentration of fast food restaurants. Poor eating habits and no access to affordable healthy food options create and perpetuate disease and obesity, which leads to more lost days of work, illness, and death from preventable diseases. By making an apple $6, but a bag of chips and a pop 99 cents each, you are deliberately setting up a system for people to have failing health. By making us sick, the people in power get money from the insurance companies. They prescribe medicines, the government gets money from pharmaceutical companies. It is always profits over people. 6, the government allows corporations again to buy up rental properties and build unaffordable housing, which forces people in the community out, which further creates a housing crisis, which in turn increases the effects of mental health challenges and mood disorders, increasing the rate of alcohol and substance use, misuse, and addiction, and the likelihood of justice involvement, which then gets the government money from the for-profit prison industry. Our children are exposed to these adverse childhood experiences, which then repeats the cycle. Profits over people. Prop 1 is the rim of this cycle that I do not want to repeat. Again, cum hoc, ergo propter hoc, please. She went, I'm gonna go.
Would you,
I will wrap it up.
would you focus on the Prop
Yes,
1
yes,
rather than
I'm
the
coming
general,
down. Yeah, I'm coming down.
economy?
Yeah,
That's all I'm asking.
no worries. So, Prop 1 is a racist proposition. Granville Stanley Hall was the first person in the United States to receive a PhD in psychology. He was also a eugenicist. Eugenics believes that you can eliminate inferior characteristics by promoting and then promote those to believe superior. Due to this long history of racism in the psychology and psychiatry department, Proposition 1 makes us fear that these racist beliefs will continue because doctors still today are still racist in mental health. Now, let me bring you to my story. My story of medical abuse begins in 2003. My former spouse joined the Army. We moved to Texas. Before we moved, I was already diagnosed with fibromyalgia and osteoarthritis and various gut issues. The stress of the move, leaving everything I knew thousands of miles away, as well as dealing with childhood trauma, caused me to become depressed. As a kid growing up in Detroit, I had the adult responsibility of taking care of my drunk mother and my brother's children. I even had to rescue several of my brother's children from crack houses when they took them to him as a child. So as a child, I knew that drugs were not for me. Now fast forward, I go to the psychiatrist, I leave her office without ever being tested with 12 very strong antipsychotics, anti-mood stabilizers, and other psychotropic drugs, and being called bipolar and schizophrenic. The medical problem in America is that doctors and clinicians are on medication first with BIPOC mental health, followed quickly by gaslighting the patient into thinking that they are not getting better because they're resistant to the medication without ever testing a patient for the diseases. I've had excessive amount of drugs and 4 rounds of unneeded ECT because I was resistant. And I'm gonna jump forward because you guys want me to, so I'll jump forward. In November, after consistently being the squeaky wheel, I finally, after 20 years, got my full psychological evaluation with a neuropsychologist. Turns out, no, I'm not bipolar or schizophrenic. I have autism, ADHD, and CPTSD. Only one of those things need medication. One of those things need medication. The side effects and illnesses that I've developed from getting the wrong medication include pancreatitis that required 3 surgeries. One, I almost died because the doctor popped my lung when he was taking the scalpel out. I ended up with a chest tube, 4 days, and when I got out of the hospital, I came back the next day because I had developed severe pneumonia from taking Seroquel. The second thing that I developed was severe torticollis because I was on Thorazine for years. And my head was literally on my shoulder for years before a doctor finally said, hey, that's not right. Because of all these illnesses, I was given OxyContin, Percocet, Dilaudid, and fentanyl patches, among others, at the same time. All by the exact same doctor. Not doctor shopping, the exact same doctor gave me all of this. So I am a doctor-created addict. When I tell you that the people that this proposition is hurting, many of these people might not have their correct diagnosis. Many of these people have not gotten the chance to advocate for themselves and to go to a neuropsychologist to make sure that they're given the right medications. That's probably why they're resistant. That's probably why they're not getting better. Putting people into locked facilities is not a home. You say that you're gonna build a home, but you're not really building a home. Last year, I turned 50. And last year, I started my year with the mantra of, this is gonna be a mess around and find out year for the world. And I am on my Jared Moskowitz, and I have proof that I am willing to share with all of you about how similar mental health disorders all line up, and instead of people looking further down the line and say, hey, this person might be manic, this person's manic, instead, they might just have ADHD. Thank you.
Thank you, Latanya, and I have to apologize for the fact that we've had to cut your time. Too often this happens in these kinds of forums. We indicate to people that they have 15 minutes to speak, but usually they end up, going over 15 minutes. Very difficult to control this kind of situation, as well as the questions and the amount of time that it takes to answer the questions or to even put forth the questions. Or as Colleen said, people not asking questions but rather stating various information. So again, I apologize to Latanya, who came all the way from Sacramento to be with us today. So I'm afraid there's no time for questions, unfortunately.
Oh, please,
Well, the problem is there's another group coming into this room. It's nothing that we could control, okay? Certainly if we could extend it, we would, okay? But there's another group coming in and we need to clean.
We could go till like 12:45, I mean, that's a
Oh,
little
okay,
bit.
well, you think we can do that?
Yeah,
Okay, then
yeah.
we'll take a couple of questions and I'll watch closely. That gives us like 8 minutes, okay? So, Michael, please.
So I loved Chuck Wynn's quote when he said, "Politics does not have to be contentious." I just want to say I have high regard for Senator Eggman,
Yes.
and for Genevieve Valentine, and for Latanya Bouchard. I appreciate your passion. I think that there's a lot of good things that could come from Prop 1 if it passed, but as Latanya pointed out, it was rushed.
The manner.
It was put together very quickly by very smart people who are not at the street level, who are not working with individuals living with mild, moderate, and severe mental illness in wellness centers, for senior citizens, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You have to wonder, all of the people who have donated millions of dollars to support Prop 1 are gonna reap millions and millions and millions of dollars. Governor Newsom, God love him. I love him. But he's gonna get political capital from the millions of dollars that he's putting into it. Okay, so I would encourage everyone to oppose Prop 1. It is a David versus Goliath kind of an opportunity, and I wish I could say much more, but
Time-wise.
thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Michael. Someone else over here.
Can I just respond to that? If I could just respond, we initially introduced this bill in 2002, and it went all the way through, and then we ended up not taking it up on the last night. All last year, there have been negotiations, the behavioral health directors have been at the table. So the idea that this was passed in a rush, this went through the entire legislative process, like every bill does. In the state of California, things are published and in print for a period of time. So just to get rid of that this was done in the middle of the night, this was a regular legislative process that we had introduced the year before and brought it back up this last year. And again, work with a large coalition and voices were heard from around the state. But
I would like to say something on that.
And
Very brief,
she
because
came to a lot of our
I want to take another question, very brief.
Okay.
Tom?
Thank you. I work with, some of you don't know me because I haven't been active for 5 years. I have 3 questions. Actually, it needs to be a short question. On a local level, what is the fiscal impact, bottom line? Are we gaining money or not gaining money?
It's just moving money. It's not gaining or
Yeah,
losing
but
money. It's just
from the
moving money.
local level,
Yeah.
budget
Genevieve,
Go ahead.
Behavioral health will not receive any new funding,
any new, okay, no new funding?
no new
Okay.
funding.
From a programmatic level, I noticed you're gonna cut core services drastically. How would that impact all of us, knowing that the heart and soul of our programs were in core services?
So it's a good question. That's why we're gonna use the transition period to do an evaluation of what's working, what's not working. We are going to have to find new ways to bill Medi-Cal and draw down additional federal funding. So
Okay,
we're gonna have to hustle.
all right, you got some challenges.
I have some challenges, yes.
The third and last question is the process. If it passes, what educational strategy are we going to use?
Absolutely, good question. So, we actually have a very robust MHSA stakeholder planning, process now. In fact, it more than doubled when I came back to the county. So we typically had about 12 to 15 stakeholder meetings. Last year we had over 30. So we will continue to do that in terms of the stakeholder meetings, but we'll also hold additional stakeholder meetings with some of our partners. So with the cities, with probation, with the Office of Education and so forth, in order to obtain as much information as possible to get your guys' feedback to then put into the buckets based off of all of those different pieces.
Thank you,
The
Genevieve.
consumers, the family members, the board, and everyone else who are stake members or stakeholders will participate in that process if it passes.
I hope so.
Okay.
I hope
We
so.
have, we have 3 minutes.
Okay, so my question is this. Number one, why are we advocating to HUD for housing? Because number two, we don't have housing here. I'm an advocate for housing, I'm an advocate for homeless, I'm an advocate for mental health, number one. Number two, if we lose this money, you know, Reagan took it all away from us and now we're trying to build it back. Now that we're building it back, we need the stability of keeping of what we have, right? So the bottom line is, why are we urging to take away what we have to rebuild and giving away admin money, which we need in our county level to help us with all this Medi-Cal billing that's not gonna come to us for 6, 8, 9, 10 months a year, right? And so now how are we paying people of color programs, keeping them involved, LGBTQ programs, all those special population programs, right? So here, the thing is, I love you. I hope you run for something else because you're a strong advocate for a whole lot of stuff. But we need housing money, not housing money that says mild to moderate. Here, we're going to put you in an institution of some unlocked law. But we need to put you because you're in a shelter and you're ready to be housed. But we don't have any housing for you. So now we're going to lose you because if we don't catch them when they're ready.
The county, I mean, that's part of the process. The county is gonna come together with a plan to do that housing. There has never been a comprehensive plan to do that
You
housing.
know,
We
we
can-
gotta get women of color in there, we
I
gotta
know.
get these people in the
From the
county. You
same
know
headline.
the county is not gonna give us housing
The county's
unless
gonna
they
have
get
to
the
give us
money
that
for it.
housing.
Excuse me,
The county's
please.
gonna have to give us.
Don't leave office.
I appreciate how passionate we all are on this issue. People on both sides of the issue are very, very passionate, and I appreciate that, okay? However, unfortunately, we're out of time. I appreciate the fact that you all have come
Daphne,
to,
why don't you do 2 more questions? All right, is there
Do I have-
other?
can I
Pick
do
her.
two?
Yeah, go for it.
Pick her right here.
Oh, okay, I just assumed I'm looking at the clock.
I know,
and
I'm-
assumed you're watching, okay.
I'm calling in favors.
Okay, thank you, okay, oh, good.
Her, right there. Her.
Thank you, okay, who is the other question
Her.
from?
She has a question.
So good afternoon, everyone. My name is Nikita. I actually am a case manager with behavioral health. I do service African Americans, Middle Eastern, LGBTQ, the underserved population, right? I've also been on the substance abuse side and came over to the mental health side, so I see both scopes, right? And so what I've noticed is homelessness is gonna be in any situation, right? So that's the thing that I've noticed with Prop 1. We failed to actually tackle the homelessness, and we're trying to take away from a pot that's already empty, right? If you looked at the graphs, you saw that there was a 15% and then there was another 15% for housing other options, right? So that's a combined percentage that you're willing to focus on just on housing, but you're taking away from the core SD clients, right? And so at that point, it's like, okay, are we really doing a service or a disservice to our clients? Because at what point do we say, okay, you know what? Yes, there is a issue with housing, and we need to address that, but we cannot take away from our other programs, from mental health, from substance abuse, from all these other programs. You're talking about taking away from early intervention. Why are we gonna wait till they get into these programs, right? When we can already address it, when we have programs like Central Valley Low Income Housing, we have Housing Authority, which they have been, I'll be honest, they've been failing some of our clients, right? Because now they're having to wait on vouchers and they've been on wait lists for over 15 plus years, right? There's been clients who have came and said, no, I don't wanna go into a housing program. There's been clients who said, you know what, yeah, I have this funding, but I can't utilize it, right? So that's where I want to ask, what are we gonna do about the housing program? Don't take away from our mental health services, our behavioral health services, but what is another option? Because Prop 1 does have some loopholes right? That it's not answering everything and addressing everything. And I feel that our populations will get underserved. I need to know what's the solution from that.
Thank you. Okay, last question.
Thank you. I first want to say that the satellite services through VHS are life-changing in a positive way. But I have kind of a couple questions, and I've written them down, so I'll be really brief about this. But since Prop 1 initially started, what, 20 years ago almost now, right?
MHSA.
Right.
Yeah.
It's been said in this meeting that about 18% more people are insured. But where are the doctors serving the newly insured? There's like more wait times for primary care and up to 3 months for a first appointment for mental health services in this county. So the existing clients are also dropped to make room for the new clients. So like, where's the money going initially in this prop? And why are we adding to a problem as far as finances goes? One question.
Can I answer the wait times? So I think that's
Yeah.
really important for everyone to know our wait times. At County Behavioral Health, it is not a 30-day wait by any means. In fact, you can get doctor services the next day after you have an assessment. You have to have a clinical assessment to determine medical necessity before we refer you to a doctor because of the scarcity of doctor appointments. But you can get a doctor appointment in children's within 48 hours from that assessment, and in adults, it's approximately 7 days at the calendar. So that's as of today's statistics. I cannot speak to the health plans, but I can speak to our specific county programs. You can see a doctor.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Also, has anyone broken down the cost per house or per bed under this new prop? I'm not a numbers person, but billions of dollars for thousands of beds sounds like a lot more money than any of us in this room are paying for our own housing. Just like food for thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you all for being here, and thank you very much to our presenters. We appreciate that you took the time to be here. And before you leave, I just want to point out that on the table there at the end of the room, there's some information regarding particularly the candidate forums that the league will be holding beginning of next month. And also, as you go out the door on the outside in the foyer, it will also be information that is, what is it called? Say again? I can't.